Fabulous. Without taking any more time, then I'm going to turn the time up till about the last 7 or 8 minutes of the course over to Leah Treesh from Munich International School. Leah, it's all yours.
Good evening, good afternoon, whatever applies. Today, the title of what I'm going to talk about is Learning-Focused Tech Integration. And at Munich International School, and in my practices when I work with other schools, we always make sure that we don't talk too much about technology. We always talk about the learning that needs to happen with that. So with that in mind, we will progress. First, though, so you can put a name with a face, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am originally from the States, as you can probably tell by my accent. I have a background in English and English education. Have also had my master's in instructional technology, and now I work at Munich International School with learning technology, supporting teachers, curriculum, project management, etc. And I also do some consulting with other schools. So that is the name with the face. When we look at the underlying goal, I want you to try to think about your school and your school's missions and your school goals when we look at this. So to redefine learning practices to match the needs, culture, and expectations of today's students. If you feel like that somehow matches your goals at your school, please click on the smiley face. Okay, excellent. As we're going through this, I'd like to mention that I have paid very close attention to the frameworks, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a task as I move through what I want to talk about. And I want you to keep the frameworks at hand, and whenever I mention something that seems to match one of the frameworks, in the chat window, I want you simply to put that framework number. So if you understand that, please put the smiley face. Excellent. So we're simply going to write in the number of the framework if you think it matches what we're talking about. Okay, the first question I'm going to ask you to do, and I want you to respond by using the chat window. And I want you to come up with any description that quickly pops in your mind with what you see in the pictures that are given. So simply now, if you would, for the next 15 seconds, please type in adjectives or descriptions of what you see in this slide. Okay, good. Collaboration. Very good. What else do you guys see? Groups, good. Student sharing, excellent. Other than collaboration and sharing, okay, good. We have creative use of technology, construction of knowledge, excellent. Good. Okay, very good. Those are very good observations. Multi-use ping pong tables, definitely. We definitely have space issues, so we have to make the most with what we have and a beautiful outdoor environment. Is there anything else you notice in the pictures as well? For example, are all the students sitting in straight rows? Okay. No adults in the picture, just the ones behind the camera. Good. Also, okay, does it look like students are involved in consuming information or creating projects? Do you see consumption or creation? Okay, good. And feel free to respond by the chat window. We're going to talk about a little bit later why that creation aspect is so important, because we all do it. We're in our homes and we want to find something out. We don't have to make a trip to the library anymore. We can simply look it up online. But anyone can consume information. And so we're going to look at the difference between the consumption and the creation. Now, I want you to think back to those adjectives. The collaboration, for example, sharing, which is a verb, I guess, at that point. So tell me now why it matters. Why do those things matter to what we are trying to do in our schools? If you please respond by using the chat window. Definitely, high order thinking is very important. Life skills, absolutely. The environment, also, we do take good advantage of that. Knowledge is created, good. 21st century skills. Those are very important. Working in teams, absolutely. Are there any more comments anyone would like to add? Good. Workplace skills, absolutely. If this kind of environment, this kind of teamwork, collaboration, etc., is something you're striving for in your schools and your practices, please click the smiley face. Easy question, right? I'll click mine too. Definitely. Now, I'm going to ask you to actually click the confused face if this is something that sometimes seems easier said than done. And that definitely is the case when we are in our schools and we think of all these great ideas we want to implement. We understand the kind of learning we want to take place in our classrooms, but sometimes how to get there and what that actually looks like can sometimes be a bit daunting. If you agree with that, please click the smiley face. Excellent. Well, I'm glad everybody. So the next slide we are going to look at is the SAMR model. If you have seen the SAMR model before, would you please click on your yes button, selecting yes for your answer, if you've seen the SAMR model. Okay. So the SAMR model essentially is a way for schools as a whole or teachers individually to look at and rate their level of integration for technology in the classroom. And if you notice on the slide in the materials I sent you, there is a reference for the source. It was created by Ruben Funtendora. And if you look at the link below, that there's a podcast that thoroughly explains what the SAMR model is. So one thing I would encourage you to do is to look at that. Let's take a minute and look at the different levels. And I want you to especially pay attention to the difference between each level and how it's raised. If you wonder where the SAMR model gets its name, notice that substitution is the S and augmentation the A. It builds from the bottom up. So I'm going to give you a moment to look at the different levels. So we can get an idea of what these different levels look like. I want you to try to imagine for a minute thinking of technology simply being used as substitution. And when we think about substitution, we think of a direct replacement. Can anyone think of an idea and type it in your chat window of what substitution might look like in the classroom? An electronic textbook, definitely. Okay, an e-book instead of a book, electronic worksheets. Okay, these are definitely good examples. Some of these might actually fit in the augmentation if, for example, an electronic book had links to a dictionary or some kind of function like that. But simply, for example, an electronic worksheet or a book you read that has no additional function would serve as substitution. Now, when you look at augmentation, modification, and redefinition, and I'm not going to spend tons of time on each of these steps and just teach the SAMR model because that is something you can do some research on your own. I just want to use it for a model and introduce it to you. But as we talk about the SAMR model, we are going to focus on the level of redefinition, which is what we are all striving for. So for redefinition, we do need to keep in mind that when we are integrating technology into the classroom, all of our projects, all of our activities, and all of our lessons do not have to reach redefinition. We do need to also keep in mind that balance aspect, and sometimes it is just fine to read an electronic book. Just because it's not a grand project does not mean that it's not effective. But we are going to focus on what redefinition looks like. So when I turn to the next slide, I'm going to show you words that describe some characteristics of redefinition. And I want you to take a moment, okay, and read those words, read those descriptions. And again, as we talked about before, we all want these things in our classroom, and that's very clear, and that's why we're all here this evening. But how do we reach those? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Something. Every activity has to do with objectives. That's really important. One thing that I see at our school is the questions are changing. I used to get questions 4 years ago, 3 years ago, things like, oh, and we're on a Mac platform, so, oh, this garage band, it's really cool. How do you think I could use that in the classroom? And while the enthusiasm was definitely wonderful and it was definitely appreciated, the question was a bit backwards. The question should be, I have this unit, and I want to know how I could best reach the students with this unit. So you're kind of flipping that and creating versus consuming. And I'd be interested in a minute when we get to the next slide hearing some of your thoughts on that, because there definitely has to be a balance. You can't give students free rein and just say, oh, create, and without having an objectives-based framework for that. And with that, of course, come projects, and differentiation is kind of a natural response to that. Take away from this is to really become familiar with the SAMR model and really think about each task, each unit, and see where it falls on the SAMR model or something similar. It doesn't have to be the SAMR model, to really see how transformational what you're doing is doing. If it's just substitution, then that's okay. But if it's always substitution, you need to really think about the investment time-wise that you have put into the technology.